minutes, but we just want to start right on time to keep to our schedule. So hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Michelle DeRusha, Communications and Events Coordinator for NSA, Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. This is our fourth plant talk of the season, so we are really excited that you're here. So if you're not familiar, I give this little spiel every time. So some of you have heard this already. So thank you for being patient. But just in case there are new visitors with us, if you're not familiar with Nebraska Statewide Arboretum, we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to plant Nebraska for healthy people, vibrant communities, and a resilient environment. And we do this all across Nebraska through tree planting and garden making and education and outreach events, just like this one, and lots of in-person events too. We are also a member organization. We love our members. So if you are a member of NSA, thank you. We appreciate your support. Our work is funded in part by member support and donations from people who value sustainable landscaping and native plants and trees. So if you're not a member and you're curious about some of our benefits and how membership helps NSA, you can, sorry, I've got a little message up here. I have to click that off. You can go to plantnebraska.org and there is a link down in our chat. We have 3 more Winter Plant Talk webinars coming up. So if you haven't registered for those, you can do that at plantnebraska.org. The next one is 2 weeks from today, Thursday, February 15th. It's a Water-Wise Plant Talk about how to care for your trees, plants, gardens, and yard in drought. It will be with Bob Hendrickson and Justin Evertson. A lot of you, I'm sure, know them. And we will also be recording all of our webinars here and I send out a link at the end of the day. So if you miss one of them or you didn't catch all of it, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. So just a reminder, for those of you not speaking, to keep your microphones on mute so that we can minimize background noise. That would be really helpful. You can feel free to put questions in the chat and we will get to those. We'll also have time for a little Q&A portion at the end of our talk. And today's topic is about exploring alternatives to traditional turf grass. And we have Brad Kindler with us today, who is Sustainable Landscape Specialist for the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. He's going to start by giving us a big picture overview of the various options and what they entail. And then we'll also be hearing from Stephen Schaefer, who oversees alternative lawn trials over at Aldersgate Gardens, which is an NSA affiliate site here in Lincoln. And if you have not been there, it's over at Aldersgate Methodist Church in Lincoln, and it's an amazing site, open to the public, so it's definitely worth a visit. And he'll be telling us about some of the 12 experimental lawn trials, alternative lawn trials he's been messing around with for the last year, so that's really cool. So I'm going to hand it over to Brad to get us started. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm excited to see some friendly faces out there. Hello to everybody, and thanks for joining over this lunch break. Let's go ahead and get started. Michelle, let me know if you can see my screen. Are we good? Okay. Yes? Excellent. Okay, you guys. Well, this conversation really came out of last year's publication of The Seed. And so The Seed, the tagline on it says, "Let's rethink the lawn." And this generated a lot of conversation in our sustainable landscape community. In that document, there was a conversation about sedge meadows, buffalo grass, purposeful turf, polyculture lawns, gardening with native trees and turf. If those are things that you're interested in, please check out that publication. It's available on our website. We're going to go through a little bit of that. But again, this is where this conversation comes out of, was last year's publication and the work that Stephen's been doing. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview here. Let's see. Okay, so I want to start by just providing some definitions. These definitions are really something that Justin Evertson and I kind of talked about. These aren't definitions that are coming out of a dictionary. They're definitions that we feel are important so that we have a little bit of baseline that we're starting from. So I just want to say a lawn is an area that you manage either through mowing or gardening, and it contains a spectrum of approaches and appearances. So just for example, You could have turf grass as a lawn. You could also have an ornamental lawn. You could also have a mulch bed for a lawn. You could have a rock lawn. Anything that you're basically managing or putting out there is what we're considering lawn. This is different than turf. Turf is the upper layer of the soil and it's bound by plant roots. So here's the kicker. Turf is a lawn, but not all lawns are turf. Does that make sense? Just like a sweet potato is a yam, but not all yams are sweet potatoes. It's a bit confusing, but when we're speaking about turf, we're really talking about something that's binding the soil and has kind of a dense layer of roots. But when we're talking about lawns or an alternative to a lawn, it could be a prairie.
Hey, Brad, you've got mute.
Okay, somebody must have muted me. How much did we miss? A lot of it?
Sorry, I think that was me.
Oh, Michelle, no problem.
That's a rookie mistake. We didn't miss much. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
polyculture is are multiple species of crops growing in an area. This is an area of higher diversity. Think of an ecosystem, multiple species, polyculture. Okay, so I also want to start with a little bit of humor here. This just came out, saw it on the Washington Post, CNN, The Guardian. A lot of people reported on the world's ugliest lawn contest. This came out of a contest that started in Sweden in 2023, I believe. Their initiative says it's the most beautiful example of the most unattractive lawn for the most worthy cause in the world, water conservation. At the end, it says, they proudly proclaim that theirs is the lawn which deserves disgusted glances by the neighbors and a round of applause from around the globe. And that's us giving these people a round of applause. The winner, Kathleen Murray from Tasmania, she says, I'm all for guilt-free weekends, especially since my ex-husband left with the lawnmower back in 2016. How funny is that? Too funny. The bandicoots were wildlife of mass destruction invading my lawn, but now I see that they've actually liberated me from ever having to mow it again. This is an interpretation of a lawn that just happens to be in Tasmania. It's kind of a funny anecdote to this idea that we can think about how we use these spaces. So this is also one way in which we use lawns here in Nebraska. This is how we teach our kids to drive, right? So this is me and my grandpa Gene back in the early 1990s. And, you know, they have their value as turf, and they also have their value for wildlife too. Okay, so lawn care spectrum. Again, I want to try and set the stage for what we're talking about here. I want to talk about mowable areas when we're talking about turf and lawn to a certain extent, right? Because turf can be lawn. Lawn can go from a monoculture to a polyculture. This is a spectrum of how we engage with this space. Number one, lawn. This is your very typical suburban lawn. Think about number two as maybe a park style lawn. And number three, think about this as maybe an experiment in polyculture, adding all sorts of different types of plants and clovers. And there's a spectrum of how we approach lawn and lawn care. Again, number one probably has higher inputs, could be chemical inputs, it could be labor and time. And then we run the spectrum over to three where we have fewer inputs, but it contains higher diversity. Okay, so the lawn categories, lawn, again, one is a typical suburban lawn. It's managed in a way that presents the best possible grass with the least amount of chemical inputs. And this is from the statewide arboretum. This is what we feel would be an appropriate relationship to really well-managed turf. So we recommend that you follow, if this is what your interest is, in following the University of Nebraska lawn calendars. And they have lawn calendars for tall fescue, bluegrass lawns, and they're available on the university's website for both eastern and western Nebraska. This is an important thing to note because some people want to have lawn that is attractive, and maybe this is a space of high use as well. This is an important aspect because the pure aesthetics of a lawn are maybe somebody's value, but for us, we want to see turf that's utilized in a way either for play or activity. And if you're going to put inputs into it, this is the recommendation that we have. Additionally, these lawns go through compaction, so aerification, overseeding, those types of things will keep your grass a little bit more lush and green. So this is the tall fescue calendar. You can find this at the university's website. Again, this is probably the maximum that we would recommend. Of course, there's more that you could do, but this is also in many ways the most environmental approach to having lawn number one. So lawn number two, think park lawns. How is it that a park stays green? People mow it, people play in it, but it doesn't have that, lawn one quality. This is an important fixture in the community, right? We have park lawns. It's an important part of our landscape. We recommend managing with less inputs and attention. It could be your front lawn looks this way. It may be seed and used less, like your backyard. But think about it as how a park is managed. In this context, we really recommend seeding with white Dutch clover to provide forage for pollinators and nitrogen fixation. When you mow, you should mulch the clippings. You really don't have to provide any other kind of chemical inputs to a lawn like this. Do you leave the dandelions is the big question, right? So if you want to, go out there and pluck them out. If you don't want to, I think it's okay to say, you know what, there's some dandelions in my lawn. This is the approach that I'm taking. This is the spectrum of lawn care. Number 3, any other lawn treatment that incorporates a diversity of species. This could be a modified management practice or a variation of lawn as we know it. So what really tolerates mowing is the question for how we care for lawn number 3. Here are some examples of other forbs and species that you could begin to think about integrating into another lawn. We have plantain. This grows all over the place. We have purslane, an edible weed. We have yarrow, native prairie plant, wood sorrel, self-heal, and wild violets. These are all species that actually will thrive in a context of mowing. Well, they'll maintain in a context of mowing. So there's benign weeds, black medic, prostrate knotweed, dandelions, henbit, spurge, ground ivy. These are all things that we identify as weeds. But if you're looking to have some kind of polyculture habitat in your landscape, here's an opportunity. Okay, so we're talking about lawn mowers. What about lamb mowers? The question, can we mow it, actually should be thought about differently. The question should be, is our lawn nutritious? That's maybe the question we should be asking about our lawn. Just a little bit of a joke, but there are companies that do this. Okay, lawn number 3, this category of a bee lawn. We're all interested in native pollinators. We're all interested in ways in which we can help our, ecosystem. A bee lawn put up by Twin City Seed. If you look at the seed mix, we're talking a mix of fescue cultivars, creeping fescue, chewing fescue, hard fescue, sheep fescue, then Dutch clover, then creeping thyme, then self-heal. Just a small amount of forbs in these types of plant mixes. If you go to Prairie Moon Nursery, there are, well, they say in their advertisements, bee lawn was traditionally a blend of turf grasses with very low growing flowering perennials. They were often not native. There are, however, native choices that you can integrate into the category. So if you go to Prairie Moon's website, you can actually pick out some of these species that are native to North America that you could begin to put into a more polyculture oriented lawn. The thing that I would note about this is, in my experience, both prairie sage and yarrow from the previous slide do really well in a prairie restoration context where oftentimes you mow a trail. So I've seen those natives mowed before, and they do persist as some kind of turf in the context of mowing. So I recommend checking out Prairie Moon Nursery if you're interested in getting some natives into a lawn context and you do want to manage it by mowing. Here are some examples. Excellent. Okay. They also offer something like this. Again, a blend of fescue cultivars. These cultivars grow to something like 8 to 10 inches, and then they kind of flop over. So you really have this meadow, fescue meadow look. It's kind of like a shag carpet, but it looks lush. It's something that I would want to step into. You can also mow this down to 3 inches, and it'll kind of regrow just like any other fescue, but it's not going to get really high and get kind of crazy and go to seed. Interesting cultivars of fescue put out there as an alternative lawn option. Sedge meadow is something that came up in the seed. The sedge meadow idea really is an interesting option because this is a more naturalistic style lawn. And this is something that maybe Stephen's going to talk about a little bit more. Bob Hendrickson from the Statewide Arboretum has been promoting sedges as an option in shady areas. But interestingly enough, there's normally a sedge for every area, right? 42 different species of sedges in Nebraska, from dry to wet sites, from shady to full sun areas. Sarah has been putting sedges in bloom boxes. You know, there's opportunities for these in multiple spaces. The ones that we have listed here are Plains Oval Sedge and Carex pennsylvanica. And then Benjamin Vogt in Monarch Gardens has utilized several of these Carex albicans in a shade context. And that photo down in the lower right is one from his website. So you can have a really interesting naturalistic look, understory, maybe even forest understory look, just by utilizing sedges and forbs. So here's some examples of alternatives that we have in our community. And we want to put these out there because we want to recognize some folks who are doing the fun and good work of making a go of this in their landscape. So John Moss here in Lincoln has really taken his lawn and turned it into an ornamental or native garden. So again, this isn't necessarily turf. These are prairie plants and probably other types of ornamentals that are mixed with wood mulch in between, but really has created a beautiful landscape for people to enjoy. He's removed turf grass and put more garden in there. Is it more or less work? I'm not quite sure. We'd have to talk to John about it. But you know, recognizing that mowing is often the lowest common denominator for landscape management, I suspect that this is a passion for him. And so doing this type of work is not necessarily a labor. It's something that he enjoys. Another example here is from Abby Bettinger. So she took some of these ideas of a lawn alternative and just used a single species, this creeping thyme, Thymus cerphyllum, took out a portion of lawn in her front landscape. It looks like maybe there's a retaining wall and a sidewalk that runs near there. And she has just entirely made a thyme lawn out of this. Could it be turf? Possibly we could consider this turf. But the reality is that if I was walking by and you run your hand over the top of that, you would say, oh, wow, smells much better than, you know, any other grass that's growing, you know, along a retaining wall adjacent to the sidewalk. I really think it's a neat example of something that is both garden and it has function to it as well, right? There's some opportunity for pollinators. I want to bring this up because I know a lot of you are asking, how is it that I'm going to do this? How is it that I take lawn or turf out of production and put it into something else? So if you're genuinely interested in putting it into native plants, bedding plants, or you know, something that you're going to be buying at a plant sale, how do you kill the turf? How do you get rid of that? Well, there's a few options. You can spray it with Roundup, right? This is one way in with which we kill grass. You could mulch on top of that and plant into it. You could also get a sod cutter and you could cut the sod off of it. And that's one way in with which when you're cutting sod, that's the turf, you're getting rid of those roots and you no longer have those plants in that area. Another option is to till, right? Heavy intensive tillage will really till up all those roots. You rake that out of there and hopefully you have a nice seed bed to plant into. I'm a fan of this product here called Weed Guard Plus. I've used this on multiple occasions, and this was conveyed to us from a prairie restoration organization in Iowa called Diversity Farms. If you mow your grass really low and you put this Weed Guard Plus down and then you mulch, wood chip mulch on top of it, this is like a construction paper, right? This is similar to sheet mulching. This will kill what's underneath it over the course of weeks or months, depending on, you know, how early you put it down. We've done this at a project in Steiner, Nebraska. I've been documenting this, and we'll try and come up with maybe a little presentation of how this is done in the next year. But in my experience, this Weed Guard Plus will kill what's underneath it, and then you could plant right into that. And again, this would be for planting bedding plants and other types of things that you're getting as opposed to seed. So I know that was kind of a quick run through of the spectrum of lawn care, but I just wanted to give you guys a bit of an idea of where our thinking is at. Our thinking is that, yes, if you have lawn and turf, there's various ways to manage it and maintain it. And you can think about monoculture, or you can try and promote polyculture and diversity. And then there's a whole spectrum of how we engage with this landscape. That being said, I want to introduce Stephen Schaefer from Aldersgate. Stephen has done an incredible job of transforming their landscape at their church into something that's very inspirational and educational for communities all over Nebraska. I first met Stephen in June when Justin brought me out there, and I thought to myself, wow, I've driven by Aldersgate for decades now, And I've always seen their buffalo grass, at least recently, as you're going down 84th Street. And I thought, man, what an interesting place. I should stop there. And I never stopped. But it's such a pleasure to work with Stephen. We worked together on this idea of creating lawn alternatives. And so he's going to present his experience with that this past season. And we look forward to taking your questions after the talk. Thanks so much for your attention. Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you, okay?
Oh, just unmute, Stephen. Can you unmute?
All right, I'll
Got
start
it.
up. Thank you, Brad, for the introduction and also for the opportunity to talk about what we've been doing at Aldersgate Gardens. I think we've advanced too far. Can you back up a little bit on the slides show? There we go. That's the start. So I'm going to talk a little bit this afternoon about what we've been doing. First, for further on introduction, my role at the church is to chair the board of trustees, and I guess I'm also the unofficial curator of what we have been doing with Aldersgate Gardens. I'm going to start this afternoon by talking a little bit about our project, and then in general, and then talk more specifically about the our alternatives to lawn. Okay, next slide, please. There are really two main approaches to alternatives to lawn. One is plantings, putting in trees, shrubs, perennials, and the other are what I consider lawn substitutes, things that look a little more like you're able to walk on them. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about each approach. For the most part, though, our efforts at Aldersgate Gardens has been on the first thing, just massive plantings and getting rid of grass. Next slide. Okay, since about 2016 is when we started all this. We've planted 130 trees, almost 800 shrubs, 1,900 perennials, just about 5,000 grass plugs. The next number, I was surprised when I got around to calculating it. We used to have a little over 80,000 square feet of lawn, and by my calculations, we've cut that by 3/4. We've also installed paths to make it easy for people to explore the grounds, and installed the new playground. And these numbers are increasing every planting season. Next slide. So our vision for what we're doing is creating a small neighborhood park, and we're focused on selecting plants based on their benefit to wildlife, and hope to provide a small nature-based playground for children. The emphasis, though, is on benefiting the neighborhood and the community and wildlife. Next slide. This is what we started with a few years back. We had some mature trees and a lot of grass. We had a double row of ponderosa pines on the north side of the building that was planted as a windbreak in the early 70s. But it included quite a few trees that were dead or dying. Mowing time was probably a good 4 hours or longer. We also had a small playground, but it was old and substandard. Play surfaces were grass and packed gravel. On the positive side, note the ease of access. We've got the property is bounded on 3 sides by streets. South Street on the south, Pinedale Avenue on the north, and then the busy arterial on the east. That just makes for very easy access, and really we're ideally suited to be a neighborhood park. Next slide. Okay, before we began, we had a few problems. runoff from the church's roof was one issue. And as this picture on the left shows, it tended to flood the neighbors' yards every time we had a downpour. So our first project was installing a swale to redirect that water away from the neighbors. The neighbors chipped in and paid the cost of that earthwork. And then we installed a rain garden at the end of that, right before it terminated, before dumping into Pinedale Avenue. And constructing that was quite an experience. It took about 3 tries. The first 2 efforts were washed out, and we had some major rains that summer. But after about 1.5 tons of rock, we finally succeeded. Next slide. As I mentioned, we've had a lot of plantings. Just about every spring and even in the fall, we've had major plantings. Paths have been critical. We've built 3 paths that total about 700 feet. 2 of them lead directly to the playground, one from South Street, the other from Pinedale Avenue. The third is parallel to Pinedale Avenue and just goes through a heavily landscaped corridor. Next slide. These are pictures from our playground. The sand pit is especially popular. It's kind of fun to walk by and notice how it's been rearranged. I've had to refill that pit once. I think it originally had about 5 tons of sand in it, and I ended up putting an additional 10 of sand in because it just disappears. We've got a swing for toddlers, a 2-level fort with a slide, a large log for climbing, and then the sand pit. Those are all inside the fenced-in area. Outside the fenced-in area, there's a 7-foot tall hill slide and an older style swing set. Next slide. In 2021, we built a second garden, just kind of upstream from the first, and we constructed it so that we had a little pond, and that would all hold back a 1-inch rainfall from about an acre of land and much of the church's roofs. We're trying to maintain a small pool of water. Sometimes we supplement that by turning on the garden hose. This year we added some bentonite to the bottom of the pond to retain the water a little bit better. Our intention is to keep some water in there for wildlife. Just a 1/4-inch rainfall will fill that up because of runoff from the roof. But it's been fun to watch the visitors. We've had raccoons, foxes, opossums, even a deer and a skunk visit the pond, in addition to many birds and pollinators. Next slide. So this summarizes some of our plans for the future. We want to do a lot more plantings and install a couple more paths. Our goal is to reduce our turf grass from 23,000 square feet to closer to 10,000 square feet. As we've mentioned, we've got some demonstration plots of eco-friendly alternatives to traditional lawns. We'd like to put in a few more. We want to put in some benches and swing sets, possibly some outdoor fitness equipment. Next slide. This is a kind of a summary of our landscaping plan for the spring. The blue line towards the bottom are the paths we're going to put in, and what's circled in sort of a tan color is the areas that will landscape. We'll be putting plantings in about 4,000 square feet and grass substitutes in about 1,500. And by the way, if anyone's inspired to help, you want to get their hands a little bit dirty, just let me know and we'll put you to work. Next slide. Okay, let me turn towards our effort at alternatives to the traditional lawn. The impetus for this was reading the issue of the Seed last year about rethinking the lawn, and then we invited NSA to do a presentation for our Ollie My Backyard group, and that inspired us to try several of those ideas and ways that we could find out, learn from them, and also serve the community to be a sort of a one-stop shop for alternatives to the traditional lawn. Next slide. So we had two purposes when we started out with these demonstration plots. One was to experiment with different lawn substitutes, just to see which ones of those we like best and that we might then adopt for some of our other areas. We especially want to eliminate the grass that's growing in the parkway, that space, awkward space between the sidewalk and the street. But we also want to serve the community by providing a single place where people can come and examine these different lawn substitutes and see which ones they might like and want to adopt for themselves. And I want to emphasize that I am not a lawn expert, so I'll glad to share our experiences, but my knowledge and understanding on this stuff is pretty limited. So next slide. So far we've got a dozen different alternatives. A couple were in place before, for a couple of years. We've tried some buffalo grass that we planted with plugs, and that has thrived quite well, and we're learning how to manage that. But then this spring and fall, we've put in about 10 other types of plantings for lawn substitutes. We're also trying to overseed our existing grass. There's some of the grass we intend to maintain as a traditional lawn, but we're converting that to an RTF fescue blend. Next slide. So now I'll get into some of the things we've learned. The first is that site preparation is very important. Eliminating the original lawn is sometimes harder than one might expect. What we learn from experience is that rototilling, even after you've applied Roundup, rototilling won't necessarily kill everything. It just cuts up the roots into small pieces that then will sprout and reemerge. And herbicide really is, for us, was the most effective, but it may take several solutions. Some patience is required. Another thing to have in mind is the weeds you've had in your grass. If they've been there for a while, they create this seed reserve, a seed bank, and those seeds remain viable for really some period of time. And so after you've eliminated the competition that has kept them from sprouting, they take that as an opportunity to grow and sprout, and that then competes with any new seeding you've put in. So in some cases, if you've had a very weedy lawn, you might kill the grass, let the weed seeds sprout, kill them off, and then do the final prep and seeding what you're trying to put in for a lawn alternative. Next slide. Okay. This last summer was not the best time to try to grow a new lawn from seed. seed germination was a real challenge, especially for some of our experiments. The plot that I should have a picture of had 2 strikes against it. Some inadequate preparation led to undesirable grasses and weeds reemerging. And so I had to spot spray those with a herbicide and just damage some of the new grass sprouts. So that ended up with a very uneven germination rate. And then drought conditions just magnified our problems. So, next slide. Back to that old slide. I'm optimistic that eventually we'll get that looking good. It's just going to take some additional work. Might have to do some reseeding on that previous slide. All right, I mentioned RTF fescue, which is a type of fescue that's very drought resistant and it spreads by the roots, so that allows it to kind of repair itself. And we overseeded this lawn that you see a picture of was damaged pretty badly by the drought the previous fall and summer. And so we aerated it and planted RTF and kept it a little bit watered, and the RTF just did great. It, especially wherever we had plugs pulled out for the aerating, those seeds took hold, and they've sprouted and are spreading, and eventually we hope that to be pretty much an all RTF lawn. So at this point, we're excited for the parts of lawn that we intend to maintain forever. I think this is going to be our way forward. Next slide. Okay, we've also experimented with several formulations of bee lawn, and every one has been a success. And bee lawn consists of some, I think, fescues, but then also some low-growing wildflowers and other things. And we've planted their bee lawn 2.0 mix, something called their sunny bee lawn mix, and the shady bee lawn mix. And the latter two are geared towards sunny and shady spaces, respectively. All had good germination and are doing well. The picture on the right I took shortly after germination, and since then it has filled out nicely. And that area had been a barren patch where nothing would grow. It was just too much shade. And so I'm really excited and optimistic about that product. So next slide. So weed control in the future is going to be a different story. In the past, I did a lot of spot spraying for dandelions and a host of other undesirable plants known as weeds. I don't personally object to a few dandelions in the yard, but my experience is that they can be very aggressive. And if you allow some to stay, they soon will take over. And so I have a zero tolerance for dandelions, and I'm out there spot spraying wherever and whenever I see them. That's going to be harder to do with some of these lawn alternatives, because the spot spraying of the dandelion will also impact some of those forms. So that just may mean one has to be a little careful when spot spraying. So we'll figure this one out as we go. And of course, there are some alternatives to lawn that are impervious to the herbicide for broadleaf plants. Those we can use traditional methods. Next slide. All right, this just about winds up my presentation. So these are some takeaways. If you haven't visited Aldersgate Gardens, I invite you to come out, walk our paths. If you have small children or grandchildren, bring them and let them play in the playground. We're excited about what we're building here and hope to share it. There's much more to do. Next slide. And then one more thing I want to mention. We're very environmentally conscious as a church, and so we've done a lot of energy conservation, and we're very pleased that we're recognized for reducing our energy footprint by about 22%. And to achieve that, we've insulated 75% of the bare concrete walls of the original building and replaced some windows and changed out the heating and cooling systems, serving about half of the original building, and replacing those with high efficiency heat pumps instead. All right, next slide, and ready for questions. And I think I finished on time.
Thank you. That was amazing. That's a lot of information from Brad and Steven in a short amount of time. But we do have a lot of questions, some of which have already been answered, all or in part, but I'll just kind of tick through these in the chat, and others feel free to jump in if you just want to verbally ask a question. Okay, so Marty had the first question. He's interested in alternative lawns to reduce potential nitrates contaminating the aquifer. So what kind of lawn do you recommend to protect our aquifer? It's a pretty specific question.
So Michelle, I think the first thing that I would say, I'll jump in here, and I think Bob, Justin, and some of the others folks from NSA can jump in, but any kind of fertilizer that you're putting on your lawn, first, if it ever is contacting concrete, sidewalk, or driveway, that needs to really be immediately swept or blown back into the lawn. You know, this is one of the biggest challenges when people fertilize. You'll see fertilizer, little pellets on the sidewalk, or you see them on the driveway, and that immediately is going to go into your waterway on in a rain, in a rain event. So, that's the first thing that I would say. I'm not entirely sure how much nitrogen pollution is coming off of lawns. I know we get nitrogen pollution coming off of anhydrous ammonia applications in an agricultural context, but I'm not entirely sure for lawns. I do know, though, that it does contaminate our surface water when it runs off of our driveways and it runs off of our sidewalks and into our creeks and streams. So that's the only answer I could provide relative to that question. Bob?
Yeah, I would say too, Brad, one of the reasons the city of Lincoln started doing an emphasis on rain gardens and bioswales is we are having big problems with, like Holmes Lake has kind of actually set it all off because they had to dredge it, cost tens of thousands of dollars for all that silt. But then the high phosphorus that are used in these lawn fertilizer applications, the phosphorus is what's giving the problems in our lakes with the algae blooms. So for me, it's fertilize less. For me, it's more I just don't fertilize my lawn, but that's me. I know some people have to do it, right? But as I've heard with turf experts, phosphorus is already in our soil. You don't necessarily have to add phosphorus to your fertilizer mix. It's already plenty in the soil. It just has, the plant has to be able to take it up, right? So fertilize less. Or don't fertilize at all.
Okay. A couple questions, Brad, on your weed guard product. There's some interest in that. So how long between weed guard plus application and then planting of new plants? And then second part of that from Christy, do you have to cut a hole for each plant into the weed guard?
Good
So
question.
a little more explanation there.
No, that's great. No, so my experience with weed guard is on 3 different gardens now. And the first time we used it, we had 6 weeks between the time we laid it down and the time that we planted into it. So when really recently, we've been utilizing augers on cordless drills to plant a lot of our prairie plants, be it plugs or 3-inch pots or even even 4-inch, whatever, right? You can buy auger bits that are quite large. So to answer your question, really there's a 6-week time frame that I have experienced between laying it down and mulching and then going in with your cordless drill and auger and augering out the holes. And by that time, my experience after a few rain events, or even if you're watering it yourself, is that the biodegradation, or it's beginning to biodegrade, and you're able to plant right into it. And so you don't have to cut holes like you would, say, cardboard, or if it was fresh. Now, could you do this a week after you lay it down? I think you could, but I think you would want to make sure that that weed guard barrier is moist while you're augering it, because what might happen is you might start to auger and it's going to pull it, and as it pulls, you're going to start seeing areas that are exposed. So I think ideally, if you can do it 6 weeks before, that's great. In this instance, we did it in the fall for a spring planting.
And Brad, I've seen, I remember it took many, many years for me to see cardboard put down to smother grass. And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, why don't you just bury it in like mulch layers of mulch? Why bother with the cardboard, right? Cardboard can buy you a lot of time. So say you kill that grass or eliminate it in the spring with the intent of planting it in the fall, that cardboard is going to buy you all that time to say, all right, now I have time to plan and think about this and just have an empty bed. There's no rule, right, Brad, that says I got to get this planted up like ASAP. And that cardboard, man, and then by the time you're planting in the fall, it's broken down enough to where you can just go right through it, right, really easily.
Absolutely. And just like a lot of the beds, mulch beds or whatever, you'll start to see the mycelium working, and you get the little white fibers that are growing
Yeah.
underneath there. The ecology starts to happen. The earthworms start to come. There's a moist environment. It really is an improvement for the entire bed, in my experience.
Yeah.
That's cool. Stephen, you didn't use any kind of cardboard or weed guard stuff, right? You just said you like tilled it up a number of times and then used herbicide.
For the most part, we've just used herbicide and then often just planted directly into the dead turf.
Okay.
We've just didn't seem feasible for me for large areas to put down any kind of cover. And I noticed one question came through about isn't Roundup and other herbicides harmful? My answer to that is, if one is judicious in using those products, and of course you got to be careful for your own personal safety, that they're not damaging to the environment. As a practical matter, I don't know of another way of doing large areas than to use herbicide. And on the other side of the equation, the things we're putting in, I believe, are quite environmentally beneficial.
Yeah, Brad or
Yeah, thanks for
Bob,
that, Steve.
Justin.
I appreciate that. I do feel like some people may, again, on this spectrum of how we're going to engage our lawn, there's a whole host of options. I have used a sod cutter before, and people who've used them, they're a monster, right? If you can even get one to your house, you've succeeded. But then getting it to work, is another challenge. There's a little bit of a learning curve. But if you have a traditional lawn and you're looking to do something different, especially a bed, let's just say we want to take out 250 square feet and we're going to create a curved linear bed. A sod cutter is an option. You can also get a sharp spade and just start cutting it yourself. But once you take off, maybe 2.5 inches of that turf sod, you're really down to bare ground. Now, here's the challenge, I think, is that you also eliminate a lot of organic matter, which is that kind of top layer of soil. So there's some life, there's some nutrients that are in that area. But a sod cutter is one option to just eliminate the existing turf, and then you are to bare ground.
Yeah, I like that, Brad. And one thing I've seen with sod cutters, you can flip the turf, right? I mean, that's a lot more work, but rather than just leaving it in place, you basically flip it so the roots are now up and the grass is down below, and that becomes your organic matter, right? So you're not hauling it off and you're not affecting the grade of your new bed, but obviously it's work flipping it, but it's pretty satisfying to do too, I must admit.
One more question about the weed mat. Mary wants to know if now would be a good time to start using that before the grass grows, or is it too early?
Well, I mean, I think you could probably put it down. I would do a little prep work beforehand, Mary. I mean, if you can start your lawnmower right now, I'm not entirely sure, how tall it is. Whatever you're putting it on top of, I would try and get it as low as possible. Like if this is, like some brome or something like that, and you're thinking about just smothering it and putting wood chips on top, I don't necessarily know if that's going to work. I would try and get it, if you can scalp it, or if you can cut it to 2 inches or 2.5 inches or something before you put this on, that'd be fine. Is it too early? This is something that I think we're all learning about here. So you could give it a try, but I would also, just make sure that you do your prep work beforehand.
Brad, I just have a comment to add to that. I've put down recycled cardboard pretty early. So like corrugated cardboard that I've pulled out of my recycling bin. And that's lasted pretty well, but the product you're talking about is really thin. It's just one sheet. And I've had thinner things melt on me from the snow melt and rain before anything started growing. So if I hadn't had a pretty heavy mulch layer on top of that, I would be worried that it could kind of start disintegrating it before it actually stopped anything from growing.
I think that's right on, Sarah. Thanks for that. Yep. Mary, if you're going to do this, try to get your 2 to 3 inches of wood chips right on top of that.
Okay. Steve, Lori would like to know, where did you get your bee lawn mixes?
I ordered it online from, I believe it's called Twin City Seed Company. They're located in somewhere in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota.
Right.
And they've got a variety of choices, more than just the three that we've tried.
Okay, good, thank you. There was some conversation about the RTF fescue and whether it spreads. It was mostly, I think, covered in the Sarah Browning and others chimed in on that and said it's minimal spreading and nothing like the zoysia grass. So has that been your experience, Stephen?
Yeah, I would not compare it to zoysia grass at all, but I believe it'll spread by the roots and
Yeah.
self-heal. Neat thing.
Did you, once you had your, you used the herbicide to clear out the grass, did you then amend your soil? I can't remember if you said this in your presentation. There's a question, did you supplement your soil with anything?
No, just because of the scale we're doing, it would be very difficult. When we built the rain gardens, the first rain garden, we did a lot of effort to amend the soil because we were dealing with original clay and it was awful stuff. But no, we have not done any amending of soils.
Okay. Oh, so many good questions. Let's see. Marlon has, or no, wait, sorry. Nicole has creeping Charlie issue is spreading faster than their zoysia. How do they get rid of it without harming the other good stuff that they do have? Suggestions?
Well, Bob has these really cool pads made out of old pillows over at the greenhouse for your hands and knees, because there's a lot of crawling on the ground, maybe to get that. That might be one recommendation. Yeah. Here's the thing about weeds in a traditional lawn. When a lawn has bare space, the weeds will really fill that void. And so what tends to happen is we have a little bit of death in some areas, and then weeds will creep in right there. And what we really need to be doing is thinking about getting seed back down on some of those bare areas and letting that turf outcompete our weeds that are coming up in our lawn. So, there's an option. Of course, I believe if this is creeping Charlie or henbit, or there's also sometimes ground ivy as well, people do apply pre-emergence, and there are organic pre-emergent as well that you could put down in the spring that may inhibit some germination at spring this time. Bob, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, Creeping Charlie's, it's tough. And Creeping Charlie's the same thing as, oh, what'd you say? Ground ivy. They're both the same bird. But, yeah, my experience with Creeping Charlie is if I get a flat spade on one of my nice cushions, I can take out a patch of Creeping Charlie just scraping right under the soil because the crown is right there at the soil. Once you get the crown gone, the plant's gone. I'm like, I can clear a 20 by 20 foot area in 15 minutes with a sharp flat spade. Now you may say, well, yeah, but dude, it's incorporated in my zoysia grass. I can't do that. So that's a different animal. Then my management's going to be, I'm going to let my zoysia get nice and tall and outcompete that ground ivy because a nice thick mowed high, mowed less lawn is going to outcompete it. Oftentimes you'll see Creeping Charlie at its best in shadier areas where your lawn doesn't want to grow in the first place. And zoysia is such a warm season, it doesn't get going till late May. And the Creeping Charlie's like, thank you very much. I'll take advantage of you. You're still dormant. And so I'm just not a fan of zoysia. But again, if you're dealing with shady areas, then you're saying, I'm going to convert this to a sedge meadow where I have plants that thrive in the shade rather than hate my shade.
Yeah, it looks like Marlin had a similar battle with his tall fescue and Dutch clover being overtaken in spots by ragweed, and you guys answered similarly. Justin said it probably needs to be reseeded with clover, as clover doesn't tolerate shade very well. So yeah, filling in those bare spots before the bad weeds take over. Okay, so Dean has a question for Steve. How were you able to finance your work at the church, and what is your plan for sustainability?
Okay, we have been extremely fortunate in getting several grants, several from the statewide arboretum. We've gotten a couple of grants for trees from Lower Platte South Natural Resource District. The City of Lincoln's Sustainable Landscape Program has paid for a couple of our projects where we've taken out grass. We even had a small grant from the Lincoln Parks Foundation where we converted some of the parkway to native plants. Other than that, it's been private donations, except for match to the very first grant we received. We have not tapped the church's budget because the church is like any other church. There's finances are always a headache. Okay, and the other question was,
What's your
we
plan
are
for
looking
sustainability?
seriously about sustainability. We've put some thoughts on paper and put a title on that as the sustainability plan. But we've got a little more work to do with that, with regard to that. If he wants to read a copy, have him send me an email and I'll enjoy getting his input on it.
Okay, question about wood chips. Do y'all have recommendations for the wood chips that we should use over the cardboard or the weed guard? Where to purchase and the type, please? Also, is that method food safe if we want to plant vegetables? And also, is the weed guard completely compostable with no chemical additives?
Sure. So just to answer that latter question, yes, the Weed Guard Plus is really just imagine a kind of a thick construction paper. It's 100% biodegradable. I'm not entirely sure if there's any additives, but there's no glues or any other thing that might be considered, something that maybe is oil derived or something. I'm pretty sure it's 100% biodegradable. The question of wood chips is maybe preference, right? Well, one, chips or something that you can get for free is my preference. However, oftentimes people are interested in something that maybe looks a little bit different, so they kind of can get a double ground mulching. You may have to go to an arborist or somebody who has a different type of mulch. Is there like a preferred? Well, I think it's really up to the homeowner, but I personally try to stay away from mulches that have dyes and other types of things that are in them. And if you're looking for something that's maybe more presentable and upfront, I prefer a double ground mulch. But if there's just something that I need to mulch my trees in, or I want to get this plant or this bed mulched in, I'm looking to go over to the pile by Cornhusker and First Street, and that's where I get my mulch from. So I don't know if Bob or Justin or Sarah, if you have an input on wood chips.
I get mine from the bulk pile at the nursery that
Yep.
I usually go to, where it's just chipped trees. It's not the prettiest stuff. It's not like fine ground or anything, but it's inexpensive and there's nothing added to it. But I have experienced people really overthinking mulch or compost in a lot of ways. Or sorry, what are we talking? Wood chip mulch.
Wood chips. Yeah, you got it.
Compost bears up a lot more thinking. I am very picky about my compost, but wood chip mulch, I'm not picky. I just don't want any dye in it. That's a personal choice mostly.
Yeah, I'd echo that too, and oftentimes you'll see with the bagged wood chips, first of all, it's like, what is it, $4.99 a bag? Ouch. That adds up real quick. Just say no. Go to chopped up tree. And then that bag stuff too, it's ground so fine, it mats really easy and, just kind of binds together. So if we get those 1/4 inch rains or 1/3 of an inch of rain, it doesn't even penetrate through that and get to your plants, right? And so, we need to take advantage of those small rains when we get them, right? And any rain to get through that mulch. Yeah, I just not a fan of the bag stuff. And that's what I would just say is try to avoid that if you can. There's way too many people using those bags. I mean, how many semi loads do they bring in the spring? Let's make them think of a different way to make money.
I know there's a huge pile here in Lincoln over at Holmes Lake parking lot. You have a truck or even like a little SUV and you can put a tarp in the back, you can load it up there. Guys, there's tons of great comments too and other advice in the comment section in the chat if you have time to look at that, because we're gonna have to wrap up in a couple minutes here. I'm just looking to see we did cover a lot of this already. So many questions.
Michelle,
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
I just want to say thanks to Stephen for all the good work that you're doing over there. The other thing, you guys, is the statewide Arboretum works with a lot of faith communities, and I think it's important to recognize that Stephen is doing great work. He's in a community of people that are motivated by their faith, and I think there's really a great opportunity. So if you're thinking about doing this on your own property, or if you're thinking about doing this with others, look to your church as an opportunity for someone or for other people to join in on a project like this.
Yes, very good point. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. I'll try to look through the comments. And if there's anything super pressing, we will get on the email and try to answer those. But yeah, if you're looking for a free mulch in Omaha, I would just say just Google free mulch in Omaha and see if the Parks and Rec has an area for that. Yes, thank you, Stephen. You are amazing. We just so appreciate the work that you are doing and the fact that you open it up to the public and you can go there and look at all of the different lawn trials that they're experimenting with. Plus their beautiful garden is just amazing. So tranquil and beautiful, full of native plants, and it's just an amazing space. So thank you to Brad and everyone else, NSA, who chimed in this afternoon. You guys have so much expertise. We really appreciate it. And lastly, thank you all for joining us. We will get this recording processed and send it out in an email link later on today. And that way you can go back and look more carefully at some of the slides that Brad and Stephen offered, because they're jam-packed with information. So thank you so much. And hopefully we will see you in 2 weeks for our next plant talk. In the meantime, have a great week. Bye.